Good morning, happy Saturday. I'm going to be talking about fungus gnats and what to do about them this morning. I've also got a load of questions off Instagram which are not fungus gnat related. So we're going to do a bit of a kind of a mishmash. But the first thing to talk about is what are fungus gnats. So let me show you my compost at the moment. So you tend to get fungus gnats with seedlings, particularly because they like the soil to be really moist. So obviously when we've got all these little tiny pots everywhere and we're watering them all the time, you tend to get fungus gnats. And I get them every year to some extent, but I've got to say, nothing like I've had this year. I don't know whether it was the weather or what, I've got no idea, but they've just been terrible this year. And so I've resorted to something that I haven't done for quite a few years actually, which is I'm going to be using nematodes to sort them out. So there's two reasons that they're not a good thing really. Firstly, it's not very nice having flies everywhere. And now that I've got them in my house, obviously because I've been looking after my chilies in my bedroom and then downstairs, is that they've also got into all of the houseplants that we've got into the compost there. And we really don't want them just like flies everywhere basically, even if they are tiny. But more to the point, it's those flies, it's the larvae of those flies actually feed on what's in the compost, and that's going to be the roots of our precious seedlings. And before I'd realised quite how bad my infestation of these were, I have lost quite a few seedlings this year. I think the main cause of death is fungus gnat larvae. So yeah, I'm going to get rid of my fungus gnats. And yesterday, I wasn't actually going to do a video about this today, this was going to be next week's, but I ordered the nematodes yesterday evening and they arrived this morning, which was pretty good. So I'm going to do them. So I mean, generally, like I say, I have had them before. In fact, I get them every single year and it's never really been that much of a problem. I mean, the last time I had a real problem was maybe about 5 or 6 years ago, but this year it's bad. But what I don't want to do is then transfer all of these seedlings that I've got and put them up into the greenhouse and the polytunnel at the allotment and then have the problem widespread through there. So the stuff that I have been growing on in pots and have planted out, it's not going to be a problem. Out in the soil, when you're actually planting stuff out in the soil, out in the beds, they're not going to cause you a major problem. It's only things that are in pots, and particularly things that are indoors in pots. That's where we've got an issue. And a lot of the stuff at the moment that have got this real big infestation are all going to be going into my greenhouse or my polytunnel, and that could cause havoc. So like I said, I'm going to use nematodes to get rid of them at this stage. So nematodes are basically little tiny microscopic worms. They're a living organism, and so you have to buy them when you're going to use them. So like I said, I only ordered this, like yesterday evening. They're here now. You want to keep them refrigerated and you can keep them up to about 2 weeks maximum. So there's no point thinking I'm going to do 3 applications like a month apart. I'll order them all at the same time because they'll all be dead. So you need to kind of order when you're going to use them basically. So it's really, really simple. This is just, they're kind of dried in this box here, and you mix them up with water and water your plants with them. It's that simple. A couple of things to watch for though is that if you mix them up in a watering can, when you water, make sure that you've got either a rose, you know, the sprinkly bit on the end of your watering can, either your rose has got really large holes or you take the rose off, because if you mix it up in there and you've got a really fine rose and you water your plants, well, you're just going to be sieving them all out and they're all going to be left inside the watering can, which isn't so good. So yeah, big fat rose, or just take the rose off and water them. So nematodes are something that are in the soil anyway, and they are specific to, so you could get slug nematodes, you can get vine weevil nematodes, and they are a parasitic, they're not really a worm, they're, well, a nematode, but they look a bit like a worm, microscopic, and they've specifically evolved to attack a particular, or be parasitic to a particular thing. So for example, with the slug nematodes are in the soil anyway, like they're just around, but they're just not in big enough numbers to kind of completely destroy a population. So when you're adding a vast number of slug nematodes to your soil, you're not putting a new thing in there, you're just like whacking up the numbers. They kill all the slugs off really fast, and then the numbers will eventually go back to normal, because if there's not enough slug bodies in the ground, that's gross. If there's not enough slugs for them to use as their hosts, they just die back, and then you go back to the level of slug nematode that you had in the soil anyway. So yeah, they're not risky, they're incredibly safe. Nematodes as a family is absolutely massive, and it also includes like things like potato eelworm and all of those. So baddies and goodies. They don't cross over, like they're totally separate nematodes. So it's not like you're going to be watering slug nematodes on your potatoes and then find you've got eelworm. Like, it doesn't work like that, don't worry. So on that note, about them already being in the soil and already part of the ecosystem that's happening in the soil, you can't overdose on them. Whereas this amount will do 15 square meters. If I only want to do 4 square meters, I could just mix it up and just water the 4 square meters that I want to do. Because I can't overdose on the soil, it's not like I'm going to cause massive damage to anything by putting too many in. I mean, they won't be happy because they won't have the amount of food that they need to survive, but that's going to happen anyway when they've got rid of my fungus gnat larvae. So you don't have to really worry. The only thing is, you know what the maximum amount of area that they'll do is, which in this case is 15 square meters, but I've only got about like 200 little tiny pots that I'm going to do. So I think that quite a lot of my fungus gnat problem came in this year. Firstly, it could have been either one bag of compost that I got that was pretty old, or it could have been the Jiffy pellets that I was using. So if I was going to be using the Jiffy pellets again, which I will do, but I don't have any left for this season, I'll buy some more. But when I am saturating them, I'll just use boiling water. That will get rid of the fungus gnat larvae. But obviously once you've planted something in it, you can't water your soil with boiling water because you will burn the plants. So that's something that has to be done beforehand. You could also do it with compost, but it's less easy with compost. You know, I'm going to be using this year. So basically that's what I'm going to be doing this morning. But I also, like I said, I put a load of questions out on Instagram this morning. So while I'm mixing this up and going and watering all my pots, I'm going to run through some of the questions you asked. I've got to say, absolutely none of them are about fungus gnats. So if you have got any specific questions or you want to know, drop me a line underneath and I will answer them to the best of my ability. I will also put a link to where you can get these from underneath. The company, I mean, I'm not associated with the company in any way. It is just that's where I've bought mine from. So yeah, all that information will be straight underneath here. But yeah, okay, so let's go and get the seedlings. I'm going to bring everything down. So I'm going to bring all of the chilies down from upstairs that are in my room, and I'm going to get everything that's in the conservatory, and I'm going to water them all, like completely drench the lot of them, which will be fine. And then when I'm at the stage when the things like the chilies and the aubergines, etc., are all going to go into the greenhouse, polyhouse, when I'm planting them out, what I'll do is I'll order another one of these. And once I've planted them out, planted them in, I will give the whole lot another water, and hopefully that should sort us out. Like, having a few fungus gnats is really not a drama, but when they become a massive infestation, they can cause absolute havoc. And particularly when you're trying to germinate stuff, because they just eat the seeds, and any roots that kind of just start to emerge, they just like take them out before they've had a chance to go. So okay, let's go and get my chilies. Okie dokie, well, while I'm shuffling these downstairs, let's go through some of these questions. Any that I don't manage to answer in this, I'll try and answer in next week's video. But I recorded this in the morning and I only put the request out early, so I might miss your question. I apologise. Who keeps their plants like half upstairs and half downstairs? It's not very convenient. Firstly, any tips for beginners? Beginners gardening, I assume. Yeah. Enjoy it and don't get too stressed out about following the rules. So the rules are there as a guidance, definitely, but you know, the things that are on the back of the packet, they're always flexible, and just have a go. And once you've had a go, even if you fail, you'll know so much more for the next time. Like, it's just have a go with it basically, and don't stress out about it. That's my biggest piece of advice. Have I ever thought about taking on a second plot? No, I haven't. I've thought about buying a piece of land and kind of setting up a whole different plot, but you can't really take on more than one plot. In my area, there's such kind of demand for the plots. We're incredibly lucky to have a whole plot to begin with, because most people only have a half plot. So, yeah, no. But I might think about buying a larger piece of land at some point. Right, let's get these down in the garden. So all the rest of this stuff is in the conservatory, so I'm just going to lay it all in the garden to have a big water. Another question is, what piece of advice would I give pre-allotment Jessie? And I think that would be to get an allotment. Jem Mother Cooker says, my favourite vegetable to eat. I mean, that's like picking a favourite child, isn't it? They are... actually, no, it's probably not, because you probably do have a favourite child if you've got more than one. I don't have a favourite vegetable. Yeah. At the moment, I'm loving the chard. I've just had chard for lunch again. But seriously, all of them. I want every single one of them. All the veg. Yeah, and what about things like beetroot? I mean, beetroot straight out of the ground and like bunged in the oven with a bit of sea salt on it and just roasted. Absolutely magnificent. But then, like, I want to have that with beans and roasted butternut squash. And I just want all of them. I want all of them. So I'm going to give these a water before I water them with the nematodes, just because if they're really dry, if any of them are really bone dry and I water them with the nematode water, it's just going to run straight through, and that's not what you want. So it's going to be all the house plants as well, because soil in the house. So I'm bringing everything down. I've left this one to go pretty dry, so it's going to have a really good soak when it goes out. So one of the questions I get a lot, and I've got twice again with this lot, is what are allotments and what are plots? So in the UK, and all over the place actually, not just the UK, but in our situation, they are areas of land that are either owned by the council, or they are sort of gifted to the community, or they are part of a big estate, one of those sort of situations. And then people rent an allotment plot off that patch. So the kind of standard allotment size in the UK is 250 square metres. Over the years, that has shifted and changed. Like on our site, we've got a lot of half divided plots because the waiting lists, particularly in cities. So in London, the average waiting time to get hold of one of these is about 5 to 7 years. So they're not that easy to come by, but you register your interest and then each site. So in my borough, we've got 27 allotment sites, and some of them are massive. We've only got 48 allotment plots on our site, but then about half of them have been subdivided. So we're about maybe, 75-ish plots on our site. But so that's 75 individual kind of patches of land that are rented. So most sites have a committee that is kind of like self-formed by the allotment site itself. But we don't, which is an absolute godsend, because committees can be committees, you know. So they're rented really cheaply. I mean, in cities they're used because obviously people's gardens are not huge, and we rent ours. It's about £70 a year, so it's pretty cheap. But some people would take on an allotment not just because they want the space for growing, but because allotments themselves have quite like a strong community feel, particularly ones that are really well organised. They can have quite a lot of social events. We've got a completely unorganised allotment, which has charm in its own right, really. But basically, that's what an allotment is. It is an allotted piece of land for you to grow vegetables. Places, different areas of the country have different kind of rules about them. And different individual councils and individual sites even have different rules. Some of them are incredibly strict about what you can and can't have. But overall, generally, you're sort of allowed a shed and a polytunnel and chickens and whatnot. But that is not the case for every site. And also, just before I go out and water these, I got asked, do you pre-soak your pumpkin seeds? No, I don't. But I think it's generally because pre-soaking them just gives them that little bit of extra boost. But I've never ever had a problem germinating pumpkin, courgette, that kind of thing. The only time I ever have a problem is sometimes when they start growing, they damp off. That is a bit tricky because they're such kind of fleshy plants and they need a lot of water to germinate. So you water them a lot. And then the moment that they start germinating, they really don't like to be that wet. So then they can damp off. But no, I don't. But yes, you can. Okay, let's go and mix up these nematodes.
Okay, so this is how simple it is. You literally just mix it into your watering can. Like, it's very difficult if they put the handle right over the entrance to your watering can. It's not really an entrance, is it? To the top of your watering can, because you can't get either the hose or the packet in there. But essentially that's all it is, and just fill your watering can up. You do have to give it a bit of a stir. So the nematodes are not actually like soluble in the water. So if you make a really big watering can of it and then you water half of them and then you go away and leave it for 10 minutes or something, give it another stir before you water again, because they will have all sunk to the bottom. So just remember, it's not kind of soluble. It's not like a plant food. They need to keep being agitated to stay like suspended in the water rather than just sinking like sludge. Some of these courgettes are flowering already. Well, do you know what? One of mine flowered really early last year and I just decided to leave it. I mean, I don't know how big your courgette plant is, but mine was really quite small and I just left the flower on. And what ended up happening was it just produced one, it was actually a patty pan, but it just produced one fruit and then it stopped. That was it. And the plant never grew anymore. So yeah, maybe it might be worth taking off. I don't know. That's the only time I've ever left one on and it didn't go that well. Normally I would just nip them off, so maybe have a go at that.
So that's that, chaps. We have just doused all of them in it, absolutely like drenched a lot of them. Quite a few of those were in trays when I was watering them, so I'm just going to leave them sit there for a little while and then I'll make sure before I put them back into, all the wind's blowing. So before I put them back in the conservatory, I just make sure I tip out the trays and I'll tip them elsewhere in the garden or whatever. They're not going to do any harm. Just make sure I don't leave them all sitting in water because then they'll just rot out anyway. But yeah, so what's so fantastic about those nematodes is that they just don't harm anything else. So take the slug one, for example. You've got a slug nematode that's only going to affect a slug. It can't affect anything else in the system. So if a hedgehog or something comes along and eats the slug, it makes absolutely no difference. So quite a lot of the other things that you might use to get rid of slugs, like slug pellets or something like that, that's actually a physical substance which is then inside the slug, and then whoever eats that slug, or a bird or a hedgehog or whatever, or a toad, is then ingesting that poison itself. Whereas with a nematode, the nematode is just another creature which is out normally in the soil, and it makes no difference higher up the food chain, which is an absolute joy. It doesn't affect the bees, it doesn't affect the worms, it doesn't affect anybody, which I just don't think you can get better than that, really. So yeah, that is nematodes. I've done all mine. I have actually bought some slug nematode solution, because round the corner of the house, I'll just show you before I go, we've got quite a few hostas, and every single year they get completely stripped by the slugs. So I'm going to preemptive strike this time round and get them. But yeah, so one other question that came in was, do I think I have too many hats? I don't.
Okay, so this is the big beast hosta. This, if it survives the slugs, gets absolutely massive. And then at the other end, we've got one round the corner, but up this end, we've got the cutest one in the world, which is a little mouse one. But this also gets stripped. This is the Brunnera every year, just completely eaten off at the base. They love it round here because it's shady, but look how cute this is. Because at this stage, everything looks really lovely before the slugs wake up, and then, yeah, then it goes downhill. But I've also got all of this trellis.
Yeah, so this is the little shade garden bit, but all of that trellis that was just there. We're going to be using that for growing the pumpkins up this year. That's going to be next Saturday's video. Sowing the pumpkins and the courgettes and some more cucumbers. So I'll see you on Tuesday for the vlog, and I will see you on Saturday for sowing the pumpkins.